Good morning, everyone. I think most of y'all, I think all of y'all have met Thomas Tobin. But let me tell you a little bit more about him. You've probably already heard that he's the coordinator of learning technologies at Northeastern Illinois University in Chicago. Since the advent of online courses in higher ed in the late 1990s, Tom's work has focused on using technology to extend the reach of higher education beyond its traditional audience. He advocates for the educational rights of people with disabilities and people from disadvantaged backgrounds. If you've been to his other workshops, this is about the point where there's a joke in the introduction, I know. But this topic is more serious, the most serious of all this week's programs. So without further ado, working with us on Universal Design for Learning as a secret retention tool, please welcome Dr. Thomas Tobin.
Thanks, everybody, and keep that applause going for UWG Online for sponsoring this today. I want to especially thank Beth, Janet, David, Wes, our camera crew. These folks have made things go really smoothly over the past 2 days, and I appreciate everybody being here. Universal Design for Learning? No, he's for the other workshop. Okay, guys standing at the door going, is this the room? So, let's talk today, really frankly, about some of the perceptions around Universal Design for Learning. And let me switch this over. And while I tell you a story, the reason that I got involved in this field in the first place, if we go back to 1998, I was working on my doctorate, and I was also working at a 2-year college in Western Pennsylvania. They had asked me to put together an online program for them from the ground up. Now, those of you who've been with us for a long time, you know that those are the early days of online courses. And so I had pretty good success with that, and it's all due to the faculty members whom I worked with at that 2-year college. There was one faculty member who taught accounting, and in his 40s, he had gone blind due to complications from diabetes. He came to me and he said, I'm not a traditional visually impaired person. I don't know how to read Braille. I don't really know how to get around, but I still want to be a professor here. And I figured out how to do that in the face-to-face environment. I have a bunch of student workers and student aides. They help me with reading things. At that point, he didn't really like the JAWS program that reads things out at that time, the very robotic voice, voice recognition and screen readers have come a long way. We'll talk about one of them that you have here at WG in a couple of seconds. But he came to me and he said, could you help me teach an online class? And I said, sure. Knowing full well that there must be research out there and best practices out there for how to help people with disabilities to teach. The short version of the story is there weren't any. And I had to really work sort of seat of the pants to help this fellow get to where he wanted to go. And I will tell you, I failed. He did teach a course online, and it was an awful lot of work. And I didn't know how to approach it. I didn't know how to work with him. I didn't really know what to do. But since he was game and I was game, we sort of stumbled our way through. Fast forward to today, and I'd like to talk with you about where Universal Design for Learning fits in and why I wish I had it back in 1998, and why I wish I had it not just for my accounting professor, but for everyone. And why I wish I had my remote mouse already plugged in. So, Universal Design for Learning, when we think about it, we think about it usually as a tool that helps us to reach out to learners with disabilities. So, just show of hands. In your classrooms or in the work that you do for the university, how many of you folks have provided specific accommodations for a student who comes into a class and says, you know what, I have a disability, right? Just about everybody. Anybody want to share how that goes or how it went the last time for you? Anybody not want to share but help me like force the example? Okay.
Almost all of the students that I get that come through the student services, I'd say 98% of them are, I need more time on my exams.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that tends to be it, whether it's, you know, being diagnosed with ADHD or other issues. But aside from that accommodation, I've only had a couple of times in which students have really needed some bigger modifications.
Mm-hmm.
In the face-to-face environment, it was a little bit different. I've had, you know, blind students that have the readers in there with them, or a golden retriever that likes to yawn during lectures. But most of them exclusively have just been, I need more time on my exams, and that's, you know.
So when you made those kinds of accommodations, like having a student with a visual disability, or somebody with a service animal, or even just more time on tests, how far in advance did you know about that?
Sometimes the second or third week of classes, except for the ones that were in the face-to-face classes. That's pretty obvious.
Some years ago, when we first got involved in online learning, we had a student who was visually impaired. He was legally blind, and he needed to use a JAWS reader. We were using a different learning management system at the time, and it wasn't as friendly as D2L. And so I used to go to the library and sit with this gentleman and help him use his JAWS to navigate the LMS, because he did need eyes to do it. It wasn't very user-friendly. And so that was a really eye-opening experience. At the same time, I needed to work with the professor, so I could see his frustration, and then I would go back to the professor and help that person tweak the materials as well. So that was really eye-opening.
And how much lead time did you have for that accommodation?
Oh, classes had already started, and somehow, and then the reason it ended up in my lap was because at that time, our disability services was not prepared. Like, they knew about JAWS, but they didn't know our LMS. You see, so there wasn't, now that's not the case any longer, I want to let y'all know, but at that time, because this was all new, yeah, they weren't prepared, so we had to step in.
How did it go for somebody else? Almost everybody raised a hand. Yes, Rita.
Over the time that I have been teaching online, I've had a lot of students come to me and tell me that they're going to need accommodation, and I've almost always been able to accommodate them simply because of the way the online system works. If they need extra time, you know, the exams are set up so they've got plenty of time, and the quizzes as well, and I don't think I've ever had one come back and say, I need more than I'm getting out of the system, which I think is remarkable.
And I'll ask the same question that I've been asking. When did you know that those students needed those specific accommodations?
Oh, it's in the syllabus, but, you know, they don't ever come forth. And we still do have to have the learning disabilities people work with us if there are issues.
Fantastic. We've got 3 examples of making accommodations. And I needed them. Oh, wait, it is working. Yay, okay, they finally figured it. So I'd like to introduce you to a completely fictional colleague of mine. Meg will recognize this guy as chair of the English department. His name is Read More Books. And he is a professor in the humanities department at a large university. And he has the same kind of a concern as Mary Beth and Rita and Jen. That in order to reach out to students using the learning management system, when we find out about students' requests for accommodations for disabilities, it's often kind of too late, 2 or 3 weeks into the semester. Oh, we figured out when the student told us. Rita said it's up to the student to tell us. What do the stats tell us nationally? Of the students who, in high school, have what's called an IEP, Individualized Educational Program. Those are students who are identified by the high school as people who have disabilities. And then when those people go to college, how many of them speak up and say, I need an accommodation? 30%. 30%.
Yeah.
So there's an a large invisible group to you of people who may identify as having disabilities, but who may not have any outward signs. You don't need to have a cane or a wheelchair or a service animal, although they are very cute, especially the golden retrievers, in order to have a disability. And here's, I'll just unmask the whole conversation that we're going to have today right now. This is not a workshop about accommodating people with disabilities. We started off by talking about accommodating people with disabilities. This is a workshop about my mobile phone. And I'll explain what I mean. So Reed teaches detective fiction. Right? So to get yourself in the mindset, what are some of the things that you know about like real good 1940s noir novels, detective fiction? Just throw out some terms and ideas and things. Okay, murder, smoking, yes, definitely. Okay, we're on a non-smoking campus, so put smoking in your mind, right? Okay, so murder, what? Okay, a fedora and a trench coat. And Janet is miming over there. She says, a hat and a this and a right. Okay, so fedora and trench coats, fantastic. What other thing? Say again?
Femme fatale.
Femme fatale, curvy ladies in silk dresses. Okay, cool. What else?
You said
Columbo. I just
Columbo?
got one more question.
Peter Falk?
Yes.
All right. You got one more question, Ron?
That's what Columbo always said.
I played right into it. Awesome. What other things? What other things evoke that time period, those novels? I see a plane on a tarmac at midnight waiting to take off, the propellers idling slowly.
The click-clack of someone's footsteps walking
Yeah.
down a dark alley.
All right, cool. We got it. I think we've got it. You've got this in your mind, right? This is the kind of stuff that Reed teaches. So, this is what Reed wants his students to do. And this is what we want all of our students to do, is to get excited about the subject matter that we teach and go home and go even beyond the reading that the professor wants the students to do. So Reed wants his students to go home, get into the covers, crack a good book. Here we have a student reading the graphic novel version of The Maltese Falcon and The Thin Man. There's a couple more in there too. This used to be called cheating, but now it's called alternative versions. And so this is what Reed and many of us want our students to do. They go home, they get fired up, they spend an awful lot of time before they go to bed, and they start reading and digging in and getting into the information and content, and they start reading about, what do we have? Murder, smoking, Columbo, curvy ladies in silk dresses, and okay, Robert is miming the fedora and trench coat, so awesome, good reminder. So all of that kind of stuff. This is what Reed students actually end up doing, right? They're reading the version of The Thin Man on the Kindle, on the bus, on the way to work, after they've dropped off the kids at school, and then the spouse has the car and goes some other way, right? So this is not necessarily what we might call ideal study time, right? So Reed is thinking about taking that detective fiction course and turning it into an online course. And he's really, really scared. Meg, why do that?
I too am very, very scared.
Oh, okay. All right, well, you're up front. Well, this will be the therapy corner over here. You'll be all right. Reed is afraid that he is going to have to turn into the 24/7, always-on professor. That his students, every time his phone buzzes with a student email or something, and thank you for letting me pick up your phone, every time his phone buzzes, every time a message comes into his inbox, he's going to have to respond right then, even if that message comes in at 11 o'clock at night, 4 o'clock in the morning, at noon when Reed is eating lunch, all those kinds of things. Because he's heard from those crazy people over in the computer science department that that's what they do. Right? If any of you are crazy people from the computer science department, please forgive me. But he has this sort of nightmare that even when he's teaching, he's going to have a video connection with all 28 of his students going at once. And he's going to have a chat window open and the learning management system And he's going to have to be looking at video that people are sending him, and his phone's going to be buzzing, and everything is going to be happening all at once. So you can understand why Reed is a little